What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the Stochastic Best Ball channel. I am Matt Savoca, and I'm here with my buddy Nick Lepre. I lied to you guys last time. I said this was the last one when we were talking about, I believe, the NFC South. Incorrect. This is the last divisional preview. We are taking you team by team, division by division, and introducing you to the Stochastic Best Ball rankings and projections. The NFC West is our final division, a really exciting division, one of the highest scoring divisions in terms of game totals expected this year. And I'm here with Nick Lepre at Notorious FNTSY to break it all down as usual. What's going on, man?
How are you doing? I'm doing pretty solid, and I hope all of the people watching today's video are very excited as well to learn about the NFC West. Now, normally this is a division that pretty much has four good teams, at least last year, but this year, one of the teams is kind of bad, and by kind of bad I mean really bad, but hey, still very exciting for fantasy and best ball.
I don't think Seahawks fans are ready for the post Russell Wilson era. You better hope that you trade for Jimmy Garoppolo because Geno Smith and Drew Lock, unless I am completely underestimating them, which I'm not, it's going to be a rough, long season. And we'll start with the Seattle Seahawks. Their current win total is 5.5. Pete Carroll still there, still the king of coach speak, and says that he has a 1A and 1A situation at quarterback as well. We've heard that a couple times this year. What was it? A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones as well. But Pete Carroll is lying through his teeth right now. He's got a quarterback problem. If you have 2 ones, that means you have 0 ones at that position. And so I really do believe that this team will struggle. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett going, at reasonable ADPs. Metcalf is outside the top 50 in ADP. Lockett sometimes outside the top 100. I'm still really not touching them. Even in best ball scenarios, I think it's just a lot of air yards turned to spare yards when they're not on target.
Yeah, for me, I think in best ball, I'm fine taking DK Metcalf because I really do think that he has that upside to just have that 30-point game that could potentially win everything for you. But in terms of redraft, that I'm just gonna talk about real quick. If you draft DK Metcalf, you're just asking to lose, in my opinion. He's gonna have games where he scores like 7 points or maybe 5 points. It's gonna be very bad.
Yeah, spike weeks are there. Probably. I don't know, man. I don't. I was listening on a podcast. I think it's possible that 800 yards is like a ceiling for both of these players this year.
God.
So the amount of spike weeks is negligible compared to where you have to take them. I will take shots on the running back position in best ball. Rashad Penny proved himself over the final course of the last year that he, when healthy, can actually be a quality running back in this league. And Russell Wilson wasn't exactly a world beater at that time either. He was playing some of his most inefficient football we've ever seen, and Penny was dominating. So that's a good sign if you're trying to take a bet on a running back on a bad team. Kenneth Walker is, quote, dealing with a little hernia thing, which has pushed his ADP down. It was inside the top 100. Now it's outside the top 110. How are you feeling about this running attack?
Yeah, for me, I've been banging the drum for Penny this whole time. Now, the biggest argument against Rashad Penny is that he always gets hurt, and that's the argument that I made against him for years, and I was correct to fade him. And then now I'm on the bandwagon. I genuinely believe if he does not get hurt, that I think he will be the lead running back on this team the whole season. I think it is possible that next year, if you're talking about Dynasty, Kenneth Walker will be the guy. But we're talking about best ball. We're talking about this season. I think Rashad Penny is going to be the guy unless he gets hurt. And throw that narrative away that, oh, he's on a bad team, he can't do good. We all know that you can be literally on a dog shit team that is awful, and you can still be really good in fantasy. McCaffrey for years has been on a garbage Carolina team and is like the best running back in fantasy football.
If all the opportunities in the backfield are consolidated to one person, it's going to go well from a fantasy perspective. And Penny was efficient on a per touch basis, one of the most efficient in the NFL at the end of last year. You taking any shots on these quarterbacks, they're essentially free, like a 215 ADP for both of them. So unless it's a super flex best ball draft, no need for these guys, right?
No, I haven't really drafted any of them, but I think if you are trying to create some Seattle stack and somehow maybe you think, you know what, that's going to work in week 17, I'm drafting Drew Lock because I think the team has the highest amount of upside when Drew Lock is in the game because Lock is going to do one of those things where he just throws the ball up and you go get it, right? It could result in an interception, could result in Drew Lock playing awful in that game. But it also could result in a crazy scenario where Drew Lock goes crazy and Metcalf and Lockett have these crazy games. So I think if you're betting on the upside of this team, you want Drew Lock in the game because you know what Geno Smith is already. There's
Sure.
still some unknown about Lock that has some hidden upside.
And I'll say this too. If you're creating like these backdoor stacks with like, you get Lockett and you're like, what the heck? Let me stack it up with Drew Lock. That makes sense to me. But if you don't have Metcalf, Lockett, or even Rashad Penny, if you
Yeah.
have no Seahawks, I think Geno Smith is a fine 18th round pick because if Geno Smith hits his ceiling, it's because he did it as a rusher, which means I don't need to feel as strongly about stacking him up with any other Seahawks. A third quarterback, what the heck, 18th round pick, that's fine. But other than that, I'm pretty much staying away. Any final words about the Seattle Seahawks before we move on to the contenders?
Yeah, just real quick, we didn't bring up Noah Fant. What do you think about him? Because I am pretty out on Noah Fant. He's been a guy that has been propped up for years because of his athleticism. I think he's a great athlete, but he just hasn't really gotten it done for me. So I'm kind of just staying away from him again.
Oh, happy to do it. At 175 in ADP or later in some of these drafts, absolutely. He falls into that whatever tight end category. So if I'm in that three tight end mode and I need to get three late ones, Fant, who has dealt with these same bad quarterbacks, remember Drew Lock was his quarterback in Denver too.
Yeah.
There's no real change in situation for him other than I was going to say other than the quality of wide receiver, but that's kind of dissing Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are a little bit better and more established than Sutton and
Yeah.
Jeudy, but it's still the same exact situation. Two quality wide receivers, Drew Lock at the helm, and hopefully Noah Fant having some spike weeks from a best ball perspective. The Arizona Cardinals are the first of our contenders, this trio of contenders in this league. Their win total sits at 8.5. Cliff Kingsbury back for another year. Kyler Murray's contract disputes in the rearview mirror. And it looks like this team, from an ADP perspective, is becoming one of the more popular ones. Marquise Brown obviously has a huge opportunity here with DeAndre Hopkins suspended for the first 6 games, but people are all in on James Conner as a third-round best ball pick because Chase Edmonds has left for Miami. So whatever touchdown regression he ends up with, he should make up for that in the passing game. You in on James Conner at 34, 35 right now in most best ball drafts.
Yep, and that is the exact argument I make towards drafting James Conner is that with Chase Edmonds gone, even if James Conner doesn't score, what did he score? 18 touchdowns last year?
Yep.
If he doesn't do that, he'll be just
insane.
yeah, he'll be just fine without scoring 18 touchdowns as long as he gets like 10 and is able to just run the ball and catch more passes at a higher rate on this team. I really think the Arizona Cardinals are going to be great yet again, and hopefully they don't have that crazy collapse, but James Conner is the clear number 1 back on this team. And I'm very excited for him in the 3rd round. I honestly think he should be going in the 2nd round. I just think people are scared because of the touchdown regression.
Interesting. Man, this is a polarizing player for me. You and our analyst Matt Gajewski have been banging the drum for James Conner all offseason long. And I just find myself gravitating towards this passing game, particularly in best ball when I don't have to pick which wide receivers or just receiving options in general. I'm mixing and matching and going for Kyler Murray at his 5th or 5-6 turn ADP. Kyler Murray offers that rushing upside, possibility of elite passing upside, and the murkiness related to that receiving core is something I'm really intrigued by because the talent is immense. Marquise Brown, I'm in at 42 overall. DeAndre Hopkins, I'm actually in because I want those spike weeks closer to those championship weeks later on. Even Zach Ertz, who I think is the toughest of the bets, but I still think outside the top 100 in ADP, he's the last chance you get to get 7 targets a game on average. And then there's Rondale Moore as well, a second-year receiver. Are there any that are your favorites, or are you just kind of mixing and matching like I am?
Yeah, basically kind of mixing and matching. I am nervous about Hollywood Brown because I really do think that he's going to start off the season just on fire, right? Having these crazy games. And I think once D-Hop returns, we're going to see him kind of plummet. So I'm just not too sure if he's worth it at pick 42.1. Again, I think he's going to probably finish inside the top 18, 24 at wide receiver. So he's not going to be a bad pick, but I'm just kind of worried about how well he's going to do once D-Hop comes back because I am still a firm believer that DeAndre Hopkins is one of the better receivers in the NFL.
Yeah, I still think that this team will turn to their suspended star once he returns from said suspension. So I kind of agree with you there. It's a talent bet, right? Because Marquise Brown felt like he said this outright. He felt like in Baltimore they could win without him. He wanted to go to a place that felt like they needed him as a missing piece. Now you wonder if the Cardinals feel the same way. And so we'll see early on if Kyler Murray and him are in sync. I have a feeling those spike weeks are going to come early and often and then get much more variable as the season goes on. I want to talk about some late round picks here. AJ Green is going to see the field a ton. I really still think that he's got a little bit of juice left and he's basically free in these drafts. And then we're hearing news that Darrell Williams might actually get cut from this team, which would leave the final running back 2 spot open, and that spot is free in drafts. I think Eno Benjamin has the clear cut favorite for that. I'm not saying it's a super fruitful from a fantasy perspective role, but we saw 2 running backs be fantasy relevant in this offense last year, and you're talking about a 200 plus ADP for a player like Benjamin.
Yeah, Benjamin's been a guy that I've been drafting ever since I read the reports that Benjamin was the number 2 guy out of training camp. It was pretty obvious, but people were still drafting the other running back ahead of him. And by ahead of him, it was like 30, 40 picks ahead. And it was just so easy to draft Benjamin. His ADP should move. Again, I'm all in on James Conner, but there's also that hedge scenario where if James Conner gets hurt, at least some of my teams now have Benjamin, who could be jolted into this position to legitimately finish as a top 12 running back in points per game. Again, I don't think Benjamin's that good. I just think he would get that much volume to where he could do that. Maybe that's a wrong take, but that's just how I feel with this offense.
Well, actually, this is my concern with James Conner. It might be overblown. Benjamin was a 7th rounder, but I think this team wants a pass catching running back. And if that's the case, then that pass catching work from James Conner gets naturally pulled away to this essentially free running back. So that's sort of where I've gravitated, but that's more of a variance thing. I'm not saying that James Conner is a bad pick. It's just sort of how I've played things this draft season. Not saying you have to do it that way. Any last words on the Cardinals before we move on to the final 2 contenders in this division?
Yeah, real quick, also back onto DeAndre Hopkins. I really do like DeAndre Hopkins. I'm fine eating the bullet for the first 6 weeks. I really do believe that when he comes back, he is one of the best receivers, like I said, and I think he's a steal right now in drafts. To me, it's just a no-brainer to take him, especially if you hammer wide receivers early. Then you just have D-Hop, who's going to come in 6 weeks in and just be that guy in your lineup every week. It really, he is like a steal right now. I'm surprised his ADP isn't higher. I get why people are nervous because he's missing the games, but it's like Chris Godwin, basically.
It's like the zero RB bros are like turning to running back right at that time. They're like, oh, I don't need those zeros at wide receiver. Well, why don't you take those 30s at the end of the season instead? I like that point a lot. Hey, guys, you see the ad on the bottom of the screen if you're looking on YouTube, but are you already signed up for Underdog and need more best ball action? You're looking for softer best ball contests? How about the new partnership between Drafters Fantasy Sports and Stokastic? For a limited time, make your first deposit of at least $20 and get a $20 ticket into the Drafters $1 million Best Ball Championship. To claim that free ticket, just click the link in the video description below or use promo code Stokastic over on drafters.com. That's promo code STOKASTIC. And here's the other gift we'll give you. If you put in 2 entries to that $20 $1 million contest over on Drafters, you will get the Stokastic Best Ball Draft Kit and Fantasy Football Draft Kit absolutely free. A $70 value, absolutely free over on Drafters when you make a deposit into that contest 2 times. Promo code Stokastic. All right. We move on to the San Francisco 49ers. Some big changes here. First of all, the offensive coordinator, Mike McDaniel, moves on from last year to now the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. Bobby Slowick and Chris Forrester, famous video, Chris Forrester, now back resurfacing with the 49ers as the offensive coordinator. Kyle Shanahan, still the de facto leader of that offense. And D'Amico Ryans, former player, is the defensive coordinator. This team sits at 10 wins and has a new quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo, essentially excused from all of the preseason. Let's just start with Trey Lance. His ADP has moved up 40 spots since the beginning of the spring when it's been announced that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to leave the team. How are you feeling about Trey Lance's upside, right? From a best ball perspective, how are you feeling about that draft pick at that spot right now?
Yeah, I've been drafting Trey Lance since he was pick 100. I'm going to keep drafting him at pick 69. Nice. I really think that Trey Lance, it could be the number 1 quarterback in fantasy. You're taking a bet on the fact that rushing upside means so much in fantasy. All these best ball websites are 4-point per passing touchdown, which heavily elevates a guy like Trey Lance who's going to run in touchdowns. We saw when he was playing, he didn't look like Lamar Jackson or something, but he does look like, wow, you can see a scenario where he's going to run the ball a lot. And in training camp, you can see a scenario where he has a legitimate arm and a very good connection with Brandon Ayuk. So it seems as though Trey Lance is going to be, he has the role. He's had the role since the spring role, I guess, and no one fucking talked. Everyone was so scared to draft him. Why would you be scared? Now you should be very open to drafting Trey Lance, and you should be drafting him, and he should be going at like pick 50. He should be going around Lamar, Jalen Hurts. I love Trey Lance. I'm gonna keep drafting him, and when he finishes as the #1 quarterback at the end of the year, I'm gonna be very happy because I think that is possible.
Here's the thing. Vegas doesn't want to be bad at their job. And if they really had major concerns about Trey Lance's ability, like we've kind of heard stirred up in the media sphere this offseason, that win total would be a lot lower than 10. A lot less lower. A lot lower than 10. And maybe it's a fish move if you want to bet the over here, but essentially if that win total is sitting at double digits, that means that they expect this team to be able to play as well as it did last year. And especially when you have elite skill position players like Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, former first rounder that you mentioned, Brandon Ayuk, and even Elijah Mitchell, who came out of nowhere to be a quality running back. This team has a ton of options. One thing I should say is Elijah Mitchell has been dealing with a hamstring injury for a while. And it's not something I really want to chase. In best ball, I care about it a little bit less. But I will tell you this. I'm drafting most of my Elijah Mitchell in best ball, not redraft right now. That doesn't mean I'm moving away from Deebo Samuel at an 18th overall ADP or George Kittle at around 55. Personally, I like Kittle this year. But how are you feeling about this trio of the main wide receivers?
Yeah, right now, I don't think I've drafted very much Kittle. I am kind of worried that the Jimmy Garoppolo, George Kittle love affair might be why George Kittle was so good in fantasy football. He's obviously a great player, one of the best blocking tight ends in the NFL, also dominant at catching the ball. And we all know that George Kittle could just finish as the #1 tight end. So I shouldn't say that I'm necessarily all out on him. I just haven't drafted him as much as the other top 5 tight ends.
No, that makes
But
sense. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say, but again, I still think he's pretty solid. And then I really like Brandon Ayuk. The biggest difficulty with Ayuk is they basically go back to back Ayuk and Trey Lance. So I think when you get to the playoffs on some of these websites, it doesn't matter as much on drafters. I think there's gonna be a lot of teams that have Ayuk and Lance on the same team picking at the turn. And I think that's gonna be very popular if this stack gets all the way to week 17.
Sure. How about we galaxy brain it this way? If Trey Lance hits his true ceiling, which is what we want to chase in these best ball tournaments, right? He gets there by having a Lamar Jackson-esque rushing season.
Yes.
The way that he gets there then means that he doesn't need the stacked wide receivers in the same way that we don't need to stack receivers hardcore with Lamar Jackson. We do also see a positive correlation between these types of rushing quarterbacks and their running backs. And the San Francisco 49ers consistently have a mix of players in the backfield. So I think stacking Trey Lance with players like Tyrion Davis-Price, with players like Jeff Wilson, possibly undrafted free agent Jordan Mason, who, by the way, may actually beat out Trey Sermon, last year's 3rd-round pick, for the final running back spot. I mean, these are low probability plays, but this offense has supported multiple running backs before, and we can positively correlate it with that highest upside pick in Trey Lance and get unique at the same time. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I'm drafting all these running backs. I'm drafting, even if Sermon gets cut, I've drafted him too. Like, I think if Sermon makes the team, he could literally be the #1 running back. They could go ahead, Kyle Shanahan could go point at the crowd and bring someone down to play running back for the team because that's just what he does. So just draft all these running backs in best ball because Tyrion Davis-Price, Trey Sermon, Jordan Mason, Jeff Wilson, any of these guys. Now, I understand one of them is probably going to get cut, but if you took the shot and you landed on the correct player, they could be someone you drafted at 200 plus, and they end up being next year drafted next to Elijah Mitchell, where Elijah Mitchell was being drafted because they were just so good on a run-heavy offense. So that's kind of how I view things. Again, I don't have a very strong take on any of these running backs. I'm just drafting all of them.
That's why we do multiple drafts, especially in these like Pomeranian tournaments where you have 15 total drafts. This is where I like to have a similar core group of players, almost like a DFS 20 lineup entry, but then This is a perfect opportunity to mix and match. And I include Elijah Mitchell in there. I think he's still a really strong player.
Mhm.
And when he was healthy, all the beat reporters were saying was that he is the clear number one back. He's just opening the door for someone to take more touches with him being off the field right now. We move on to the LA Rams, the Super Bowl champion LA Rams. Last time we saw them, heartbreaking injury for OBJ after he looked like he was going to dominate. And then speaking of dominate, Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford simply could not be stopped in the fourth quarter, and it led them to a Lombardi trophy. They are sitting at 10.5 wins. Sean McVay's back. We got OC Liam Cohen in the building. He was the Rams QB coach in 2020 and the Kentucky offensive coordinator in 2021. And then Raheem Morris, one of the best coaches in the NFL, is a defensive coordinator still. Cooper Kupp is the high ADP player that we're fine with in the first round. Like, if you get a chance to draft Cooper Kupp, great, go for it. He's still my number one wide receiver in best ball. The controversy, if you will, we need to talk about is Cam Akers and Allen Robinson. Early in the offseason, Cam Akers was going at around 36, the end of the third round, and he was going well before Allen Robinson's 54th overall ADP. Now that's essentially flipped. Allen Robinson sitting just inside the top 40 after being hyped up throughout the fantasy football media sphere, and Cam Akers at 51 after Sean McVay has said they essentially have two starting running backs. How are you feeling about these secondary and tertiary options here within this consolidated but strong Rams offense?
Yeah, I've taken bets early in the offseason on Cam Akers. I was liking Akers. I was thinking, you know what? It's pretty clear that in the playoffs last year, even when Akers was banged up, they want to just run this guy into the dirt. They're going to keep running the ball with him. Now we're in a scenario where I'm starting to think that with Sean McVay calling them, we have two starting running backs, that I should just stop drafting Akers, which I've done, and just start drafting Darrell Henderson. Darrell Henderson's ADP has moved as well, 154 up to 122.4. But I'm still drafting Darrell Henderson aggressively because if Cam Akers was to falter, if he was to go down, Henderson's going to be given the reins, right? It's not like they can just
Sure.
hand the ball now to Sony Michel. He's in Miami. So now I think that Henderson is in a really good position to succeed. And I think even with Akers healthy, he could. That doesn't mean that I'm necessarily off of Akers, but I haven't been drafting him anywhere near as frequently as I was prior. And I love Allen Robinson. I've been drafting him this whole summer. He is one of my favorite plays. And I think people are just hounding on him, or initially they were because of how bad he was in Chicago last year. But I really think that he just wasn't trying last year or something. He's much better than those numbers last year. I think he's going to dominate in LA with the Rams.
Yeah, Allen Robinson's a great pick, even with an inflated ADP. I'm annoyed by it. I'm annoyed by it. One of the saddest things I saw this offseason was the biggest names in our industry hyping up Allen Robinson into the stratosphere because I was hoping for some sort of mixed analysis here. But it's so positive that just ride the hype. Like, he's not going to be a first round pick, but Robert Woods was the wide receiver 12 overall when he went down with an injury last year. So my big zag play this year while everyone's zigging is Cam Akers. I continue to take him in best ball drafts. I continue to take a stand of Cam Akers over Darrell Henderson just as a talent. I may be wrong. That may be the thing that I'm doing that you shouldn't do. But those are the types of stands I want to make, especially with Cam Akers getting onto the field last year. I don't think he was fully healthy, but the fact that he was able to make it back, the fact that he's only 23 years old right now, and he had some of the best athletic metrics coming out of Florida State, that mid-second round pick a couple of years ago. I hope he gets back to form, and with that deflated ADP, I'm going for it. The other players we should talk about here, other than Henderson, not that many. Tyler Higbee is getting drafted at 168. I think he's a fine play. But then outside of that, Van Jefferson's got a knee. We don't know when we're going to see him again. No one wants to draft Tutu Atwell. He's sitting at 215.9. Bryson Hopkins, who we've seen used in the offense in two tight end sets, still absolutely free. And then maybe Lance McCutcheon, the undrafted free agent who continues to ball out in the preseason, actually finds a spot here. I'm not saying I have any Lance McCutcheon in Underdog right now, but I've heard of worst final round picks here. Anybody that stands out for you whatsoever after Darrell Henderson at that 122 spot?
I mean, Lance McCutcheon sounds like a guy who's famous on TikTok, but I do like Tyler Higbee a ton. He's one of my highest owned tight ends in fantasy football. I don't necessarily see him finishing as a top 5 tight end, but in that crazy week 17 game up against the Chargers, I could really see Tyler Higbee scoring like 3 touchdowns or something crazy. So I like him a ton. And real quick, we didn't touch on it at all. Are you nervous about Matthew Stafford's injury or no? Because I'm still drafting Stafford aggressively. I still think he's going to be just fine. We've seen him like break his arm and he ran a touchdown in against the Browns, if you remember, or he threw a touchdown, whatever it was. Have you ever seen that video where it's like, clock it, and he fucking
Yes.
scores a touchdown?
Yeah, it's a like tough guy forever is how you get labeled after that kind of play. Yeah, amazing stuff. But I think Stafford is a great tournament pick and probably a risk I don't need to take in Underdog Cash or my redraft leagues. Matthew Stafford, when drafted, just assume you are right and stack him up as usual. We know exactly who his top options are. His ceiling is just the same. They're going to monitor it all year, and let's hope that it really isn't as big of an issue as we thought it was going to be. That's it. 32 teams up, 32 teams down. The NFC West is through. All the divisions are through. And now you have a full preview of the Stochastic Best Ball rankings and projections and our opinions on these players about how we're taking them in best ball drafts this year. This has been super fun, Nick. Please follow him at Notorious FNTSY. I'm Draftaholic over there. And check out our friends over at Drafters. Use promo code Stochastic. Make those 2 entries so you can get our free Stochastic Best Ball and Fantasy Football Draft Kit. For Nick, I'm Matt. We'll see you guys later.